Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to part 3 of the debacle that we're calling the Kossel setup calibration blah 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 video series, whatever. My computer's taking a crap on itself because I am doing not one, not two, but 3 different points of view for this video. We have my beautiful face, we have the computer, and so this is going to be, the computer stuff, and we also have Action Cam. This is going to be the live broadcast of the Kossel printer thing. Yeah, so it'll be like a color commentator. So whenever something interesting happens that you need to see the printer on, we'll use that. It'll be cool. Anyway, by the way, if you're wondering why I'm doing face cam, it's because the audio on this camera is really good. I don't want to set up a microphone that I have, even though I have a bunch of good microphones, just because the audio that this comes out, I really like the way that it sounds. It's not too direct, it's not too echoey or anything like that. Plus, if I need to look at you and make eye contact, I can do so. Anyway, today's episode is going to be Repetier-Host, getting things set up, and hopefully, if all goes to plan, doing your first test print, and second and third and all the way up to 1,000th, because it won't ever get correct. But anyway, so long story short, open up Repetier-Host, or if you use any other program that you can control the 3D printer from, that's fine. As long as it has a G-code send function or a manual control, that's all that really matters. Repetier-Host is the best for it, in my opinion, but that's totally up to you. So pretty much all of this video is going to be dependent on you have everything built correctly. So the printer's built correctly. You watched the programming video from before and you've changed parameters around a little bit. If you're using the stock parameters, it should be fine, but you may not get completely accurate of a print. This is going to be assuming you did everything right. If things aren't working, if you're doing what I'm saying and things aren't working, you might have a problem with the wiring or a faulty part, even stuff like that. I'll try to go through every possibility of what could go wrong, but we'll see. If you have any questions, something's going weird, just comment and I'll see if I can help you out at all. Which reminds me, by the way, guys, don't message me on the YouTube messaging system. Not comments, but the actual YouTube messaging system, because I don't get notified for those and I don't check them very often. So I'll go on there and there'll be someone who messaged me like 2 months ago, like, hey, I have a problem. I'm like, hey, sorry, I didn't know you messaged me. YouTube comments I can usually get to pretty easily as long as I can respond, and then any other, Twitter or something like that, I can get to you as well. So yeah, thanks guys. So with this, I also recommend you have the Arduino software with the sketch that we were editing last time. Have that open just in case we need to change anything. You shouldn't need to, apart from what we did last time, but you might. The only thing I can think of is if you go into the Arduino software and look for invert X, Y, and Z direction, this right here, it's in configuration.h. This invert X, Y, and Z direction, for the Kossel, they all need to be set to false. I don't know if that's how it was stock or not, but as long as those are all false, you should be groovy. So the first thing I want to see what we can do is set up some configuration stuff here on Repetier-Host. If this is your first time starting up Repetier-Host or first time with a Kossel, you're probably not going to look like this. This is the, it's actually got the cylindrical build plate just like the Kossel actually has. If yours looks like the regular square Cartesian style, don't worry, we're about to fix that. So if you're on Repetier-Host, you want to go over here to Config in Printer Settings. Now once you're on Printer Settings, there's a couple, it's going to start you off on connection. There's blah blah blah. All these things should be fine default. Printer, a couple of these you can change to preference, but really these don't really matter all that much. Travel feed rate, I have it at 4,800 millimeters a minute, which divided by 60 gets you whatever it is per second for travel. The Z-axis feed rate, you can raise this up pretty high because of the way the Kossel is designed. The Z-axis, that variable is the Z-axis movement up and down. Because the Kossel uses the drive belts for the Z-axis and not the like lead screws like a Prusa would or something like that, you can put this up at 1,000 or more millimeters per minute. I usually have this set at like 2,000, but for the sake of what we're doing now, I'm gonna have that at 1,000. I think default it's like 200 or something like that. The extrusion and retraction speed, you can leave it where it is or adjust it. That's up to you. That's not really going to matter. Default temperature, that's also up to you depending on what you're printing. You know, that's totally going to be up to you guys. Park position should be 0, 0, 0. That's if you use the park feature on the printer. I don't ever use that, but 0, 0, 0 should be the dead middle center, the bottom of the printer. Of course, homing is the complete opposite. It's all up at the top, but if you want to use that, you can. Everything else, you pretty much don't have to mess with. Add comp printing time, don't worry about that. That's just the slicer estimation time is stupid, so I have to add like 40% extra time in order to get it close to what it should be. Extruder settings, again, that's pretty much going to be up to you guys. It tells you the different temperatures and all that you can do. You don't really have to worry. Just make sure the extruder one, the diameter of the nozzle is 0.4. That's the main thing you got to do. Printer shape, this is what we're looking for. Printer type, you want to click here. It should say classic printer probably. Click row stock printer, circular print shape. Check the home. X, Y, and Z all should be set to max. Printable radius for this printer is about 100 millimeter. You can do about 8 inches or 200 millimeter diameter, so half that radius, 100 millimeter. And the printable height. This is going to kind of depend on what your settings are in your printer. That's going to depend on how you built it. You may not have the Folger Tech Kossel. You may have a different Kossel, but most of this information is relevant. If you've built it higher or lower than what I have, this number is going to change. I have this set to where it is because it's exactly where it needs to be height-wise off of the bed. This makes it to where at 0, when the Z is at 0, it's exactly where it needs to be level with the bed in order to get a good print of the first layer. Now, it is slightly adjusted based on the auto bed leveling, of course, but I have it set to this. But if I want to, I can just go and set it to 279 or whatever, and it's not going to matter. It's the auto bed leveling sensor is going to do that automatically. So with this printable height, I'll show you how you can easily find it in just a second. But for now, if you've built it close to what mine is, it should be somewhere in the area of 269.2. That is, by the way, that's the distance from the very tip of the nozzle to the bed, not the entire height of the printer, because of the way that the printer's designed, you only get like half of the amount that the actual printer is that you can print up. But, you know, I'll show you how to figure this out in just a second. Scripts in advance, you don't really need to worry about. Those should be fine. So make sure those settings are where they should be. Hit apply, hit OK. And there you go. So now, if you've done everything correctly, you should see this cylindrical build area to some degree, and left click and you can move around and look at everything. This is where you place objects. If you kind of got to be familiar with 3D printing. I'm not going to go into how to use Repetier-Host. If you need help on Repetier-Host, there's plenty of good videos online on how to use it and, you know, how to slice objects, this and the other. So if I don't go over something, then look there. So if all goes to plan, you should see connect over here, a big red thing. Make sure your printer's plugged in power-wise and USB, and you should be able to hit connect, and it should connect. If you see this disconnect, everything went green, you're doing good. Everything's good. If it doesn't, then you may have to go into the config connection and check the port number. If it's set to auto, it should figure it out. I know COM1 and COM3 are two different USB ports that I've plugged this printer into before. I know that right now it's plugged into COM3, and the baud rate should be this big number. What is it? 250,000. Everything else you should be fine. Everything, leave it where it should be. So unless you're plugging it in with different servers or anything like that, it should just be serial connection, and put the port to. If it's not connecting a different COM, it might not be COM3 for you. It might be some other number. But if it doesn't connect correctly, you'll get an error or something like that. Just change the port number to a different one and see if it connects. Should connect. So once you've connected that, you are now in control of your 3D printer, which is awesome. Over here, if you look in the... someone's building something. If you look over here, this is going to be the manual control setting. It starts off at object placement. This is where you can do that. Slicer stuff. Manual control is what we want for right now. If you go over to the G-code setting, you can enter, or the G-code send area. This is where you can send G-code to your printer to check things, which is really cool. You have the fan, bed, and extruder temperature control. Make sure these say numbers right here. It should be somewhere close to room temperature. That means that the thermistors are working if you see some actual numbers. What you want to do right now is check the end stops. What you're going to want to do is go over to the printer, go over to these end stops, and trigger them. You should see a red light. So go all the way around your printer and trigger all 3 of the max end stops. You should see a red light. Okay, if that works, then what you're going to want to do is either do it manually by hand or push the printer all the way up into the top end stops like this. Push it all the way up to where all 3 of them are triggered. Make sure all 3 lights are on. Light. This one doesn't have a light because the motors, it falls down when I push it all the way up because the motors are not on. So just make sure the light's on when you go to do what I'm going to show you. Now go over to the G-code area right here, and with all 3 of those end stops triggered, type M as in Mary, I don't know, 119, so M119, and then hit send. Now remember I showed you the one wasn't triggering because the motor, that's why it's open. Right here you're going to get the end stop report. This is going to show you if the end stop's been triggered or not. So you can see right here that I have the X max. This is the X one that isn't triggered because of the stupid motor. But that should be triggered. It is, I know it works. Y max triggered, that means that the end stop's working, which you can see the red, it should be working. Z min is the bed sensor. That shouldn't be true. That should be open right now. And then Z max should be triggered. So the X, Y, and Z max should all be triggered when the printer is in the top position. So if you see all those are actually triggered and you see that they are working, next thing you can do is pull the printer all the way down to the bed and run it again. Do M119. Now you should see the X, Y, and Z max are all open, but the Z minimum should be triggered. That means that the bed end stop is detecting the bed. That's the auto bed leveling, the whatever. That's detecting the bed. That's a good thing. So here's where the printer is going to come alive. I recommend putting the printer in a semi-middle area, somewhere where it's pretty close to being in the middle. That way you have time to panic if things go wrong. So once you've put the printer in a semi-middle of the actual printer area, this is where we're going to actually let the printer do its printing thing. Biggest thing you need to know right now, this is the emergency stop button. If shit hits the fan, hit this button. It'll kill all power to the printer. It'll kill any signal that's going on. That's if the thing's going in the wrong direction, it's about to rip the whole thing apart, hit that button as quick as you can. Okay, this is important. You don't want to screw things up. If the end stops are correct, it should be alright, but if the motors are reversed, if something's going wrong, something was wired wrong, the motors are spinning in reverse, or the programming you didn't change for the motor direction inversion, something like that, this is what you're going to need to do, is hit that button. So, if you're ready for it, this is the home button. Normally I would recommend you hit one of these X, Y, or Z controllers, but because you haven't homed it, the printer has no idea where it is. So it won't let you go in most directions, which is why I recommend homing first. If you're ready for it, hit the home button. And if yours is homed just like mine did, you're doing good. So now that you've done that, you can hit this motor kill button right here. This is probably what you're going to want to do because my motors are noisy as hell when they're in idle. So just hit that button. It'll kill power to the motors. They'll move a little bit, but they're not really going to. It's not going to affect anything. So How did that go? Did your printer go up and home in all directions? If it did, good for you. You should now see X, Y, and Z at these numbers, 100 and 100, and this number is irrelevant right now, but it should be somewhere in there, depending on what you put it at. If your printer, all of a sudden, if two of the motors went up and another went down, you got to reverse the direction of that motor in the Arduino software. So you'll come over here and invert X, Y, or Z direction depending on what it was. Just change this from false to true or true to false, whatever it is. You have to know which axis is the one that is going wrong. So then you just upload and verify and upload that to the printer. By the way, like I said before, if you're uploading code from the Arduino software to the actual Arduino, you have to disconnect from Repetier-Host. It won't let you if you are still connected to Repetier-Host. So like I said, if you hit home and everything went up, everything's good. If they started to go in a down direction, you need to invert the motor information. That's probably the only thing that should cause that. If one axis is not moving or something like that, probably a wiring problem. Probably something isn't hooked up correctly. If you've killed the motors, it might move. So if you've killed the motors, home again. And then what you're going to want to do is hit this Z axis down a couple times, okay? And your printer should be moving downward when you click that. Just like mine is. So keep doing that down all the way until it's very close to the bed. You could also put in G-code for this, but this is the safe way to do it for right now. Only use the Z one, don't mess with the X or Y one right now. And just keep heading down, keep heading down. Now if you get to 0 and your the tip is not close to the bed, then you need to make the number bigger in the printer software, in the printer shape, the printable height. Make that number bigger. If it's too big, then the bed detector should automatically stop it. But if it's too small, if you're that far away and you're at 0, then you need to make that number bigger. Bigger is alright, smaller is not. So once you've gotten within 10, just go 1 down, and you should go all the way down. For me, I can go all the way down to 0. You might not be able to. The auto bed leveling is probably going to stop it beforehand, which is a good thing. The nozzle it almost is touching the bed. It's actually the thickness of a piece of paper from the bed, and the bed sensor is slightly above that. Like I said before, you want the bed sensor to be ever so slightly above the tip of the nozzle because you don't want it to interfere with anything. So now what you want to do is, if your number was too big, then you should have a Z number right here. Mine's 0.00. Well, here, screw it. Hold on. Let me change this stuff just so you guys have a frame of reference. Let me change this to 279. That'll work. Let me just homer up real quick. Jump cut. Okay, so as you can see here, I put up the number quite a bit for the Z. So now the Z is coming out. It's giving me 9.2. So that's just the number of how much more it had to go before it hit 0. But if the bed detector stopped it before it went any lower, that means you're about where the X or the 0 should be. So what I recommend, you can either leave it like this, it should be fine, the bed detector will do its job, but if you want to, you can take this number right here and subtract it from the original number that you have in there. So, for example, I have 279.2. If I subtract 9.2, then it's going to give me 270, which is fine. You can use 270. I have mine slightly offset, just ever so slightly. Which is why I have it at 269.2. Having it slightly offset is going to give it a slight offset, so where I don't have to worry about the bed height. It's just a bed height thing. That's all it is. So I would probably recommend you slightly offset it by a little bit. So this is 0.8 millimeter that I have it offset at. Again, this is kind of weird way to do it. It's not scientific. It's, you know, like I said, there's a lot of trial and error with this type of printing. So if it's actually, you know, detecting the bed, everything like that, change this number to whatever it should be, hit apply, hit OK, and now your printer should understand where it is in time and space. So the next thing you're going to want to do if you want to try out the auto bed leveling, if you just want to see how it works, you got to home first. You always have to home before an auto bed level. So now it's homed. So now what you want to do is type G29. G29 is going to do an auto bed leveling thing. So if you watched my little time-lapse thing a couple days ago of the 200 subscriber one, you'll have seen my thing auto bed level. So what you're going to want to do is type G29 after you have homed and then hit send. So now you should see your printer go flying down towards it, and then a little bit before it should understand where it's going to be going. And it's just going to go through and probe all sorts of spots. Now the one default for the for the Kossel that Folger Tech gives you, it seems to probe like 38 times. It's got a 7x7 array that it has to fill, but of course it's not able to go out to the farthest extents on the top sides of the circle, just because circles. Don't worry about it. I'm rambling. Anyway, it probes like 30 some odd times. It probes like 30 some odd times. So it should go up, and there you go. So now it's successfully probed. And if you look over here in Repetier-Host, you should see all these different numbers right here. This is all the offset information. This is basically how it knows what the offset needs to be. So if you've successfully done that, then you've successfully auto-bit leveled, which is a good thing. Another thing I should mention is if the bed detection is detecting the bed but the nozzle's too low, then you probably are going to want to change the Z-probe offset in the Kossel Arduino, the negative 0.6 or whatever yours happens to be. You're going to want to change that to adjust where the nozzle is and when it gets detected and stuff like that. But this is the Z-probe offset that you're going to want to adjust if you need to. I think if you continue down with the negative, then it's going to think it's further away. I'm not entirely sure. I've never adjusted mine. I either got it exactly perfect the first time, or something else magical is going on. I've never had to adjust this. I'd left it at negative 0.6. But like I said, I let the minimum be where it should be, and then the printer will offset as it needs to. Kind of confusing. I know it is. If you're confused, don't worry. I'll do something. Just comment on what's going wrong if this isn't good enough. Most of this should be good enough for you if you're you know, a savvy individual. But if you're completely dead confused, then comment on the video and you know, don't yell at me, but you know, ask some questions and I'll see if I can help. So theoretically, you should be now able to do an object print. But before you want to do that, you want to go into your slicer and adjust the slicer settings. So in Repetier-Host, you have slicer and Cura, the Cura engine. If you depending on which one you want to use, that's up to you. I've used the Cura engine for quite a while, and it does work pretty well. But I actually have different settings for both of them, and they both do different things well. So the slicer is probably the one I'd use for what I'm going to show you. You want to go into the configuration file of Slicer or Cura and adjust all the settings depending on what you want for your printer. I have a Slicer setting video for the Prusa. I'll probably do one for this one, for the Kossel as well in the future. Long story short, you know, is just if you're into 3D printing, then you know what to change. The main thing you need to look at here is the custom G-code. So for the start and end G-code, end you don't have to change, but the start G-code is important. So this should apply from Slicer and this should apply to Slicer and Cura. You need to edit the start G-code to where the first thing it does is home the axis, which is G28. If you want, just copy exactly what I have right here. That's totally fine. G28 will home all the axes. Then G29 will auto level. The S2, I believe, is what changes, which puts it into EEPROM. Again, I don't really use EEPROM, but this apparently does something, so that's why I have it like that. So G28 first, then G29. You don't have to do this. This is just me. This is all this custom stuff I've done. And then M190 and then M109 both are heating things. Those are what heat the it waits to start printing before the temperatures are where they should be. So your nozzle and your bed temperature, this is going to wait until they're at what you set it at, which I have it at 70 and 195. And then G92 E0, that's going to zero out the extruder, which is what you want to do, or else it's going to mess up. So like I said, if you want, just copy this exactly as you see it, and that should work just fine for your start G code. I also have that in there for the Cura engine as well. Everything else, filament settings and all that, you're gonna have to change that depending on what your filament is and what you want the infill, the speeds, and all that kind of stuff to be. I'll probably make a video in the future about what these parameters actually are for me, but it shouldn't matter that much. You know, that's really up to you. There's plenty of guides online on slicer settings, things like that. So now here's the best part. You get to print something. Go over to Thingiverse and download a calibration test print. I'll link to the one that I'm about to use in the description. So you just can hit add object, or you can hit load. I think this is where the one I use is. Yeah, hit load. And so I have this 20mm hollow cube. It's just a hollow cube. This printer is amazing for bridges. So even though it's hollow, it prints this top layer really, really well. Like I said, that's a lot of adjustment that I've done on my part. So place the object in here. It should be small. It's a 20mm cube. It's pretty small. Head over here to slicer. If you've gotten slicer settings, you've adjusted them for the nozzle size, this, that, and the other. Just hit slice with slicer or with Cura, whichever works. Cura is faster, but slicer has a different design, which is why I'm using it for this one, at least for me. Anyway, then you should see this. This is a sliced thing. There you go. Look it's sliced and it's ready to print. So now you want to go over here, go to manual control, hit the fan button. This should turn on the fan. That's the one that's on your extruder. See, it's working. Click the bed temperature and click the extruder temperature. These should be set at 70 and 200 or whatever you want to set it to. If you're using ABS, don't even look at what my temperatures are. ABS is completely different, but this is for PLA specifically. I have that set to just head up to where it should be. Once you've clicked these, I always click these first because it will warm up the temperatures as it's doing the other stuff. If you watch that start G code, the start G code has it to where once it's auto leveled and everything, then it heats up it'll heat up the temperatures. If you put the temperatures first, then it'll heat up the temperatures first, then do the G code stuff. So I do it this way. I click this and manually turn it on first. That way when I go and hit print, it automatically will continue to heat these up while it's doing everything else. That's why I do it this way. I'm realizing that this is kind of a weird video. It's like not very professional and kind of off the cuff, but that's fine. So now if you see these temperatures rising, that's a great thing. Print preview, you just want to go over here and make sure everything looks fine. And then hit print. Your printer should automatically home. Then it should head down. If you've changed the G code like me, it should come down and auto level. It'll just go through the whole process, and then it'll stop and wait for a little bit, and it'll auto home, or it'll stop and wait for a little bit. It'll wait just a little bit for the temperatures to get up to where they need to be. And then once it's ready, it's going to start printing. So now I'm just waiting for the bed to be adjusted. So I'm not going to wait for this entire printer to go, mainly because I'm almost out of memory and like everything. So main thing is, once you take this off, make sure you have a pair of calipers or measuring devices somehow. And you want to measure the dimensions of this cube. It should be 20 by 20 by 20 millimeter. If the X and the Y dimensions are too big or too small, you have to go into the Arduino software and adjust the Kossel settings that we adjusted in the first video. The delta diagonal rod measurement, the 240, you want to adjust that up or down to get a smaller or bigger size. That's pretty much what the main size adjustment thing is. You shouldn't have any problem with the Z height being wrong unless there's some serious issues going on. Like I said, if the sizing is not correct, then 240, adjust this a little bit, like one up or one lower, and see what it does. Keep test printing until you get things where you want them to be. That's pretty much all you can do. And like I said, if you go in, when it starts to print, things should work. They should just work. As long as you have all your temperatures up to where they should be, and you know, have the settings. Again, 3D printing is one of those things, especially this kind of rep printing, where you really, you know, you have to just keep trial and error things. This should get you going to where everything's kind of working, but you're going to have to adjust things even beyond this video, way beyond this video. You're going to have to keep adjusting parameters and all that. So now you can see my printer is printing. So you can see here, if you go over to Repetier-Host, the manual control, it's going to show you this right here. This is actually where the print head is currently as it's printing. You can see what it's going to be doing, you know, shortly thereafter. If you see little like balls of stuff form on the from the nozzle, then that's totally okay. Just try to see if you can get them out of the way, because you don't want it to affect the printer at all. So like I said, this is just going to keep printing. It's going to print a 20mm cube. I know mine are perfectly square, so I don't have to worry about it. But yours, you're going to have to adjust a little bit, and that's pretty much how you do it. And you can adjust all the settings, the slicer settings and all that, to get different quality prints and all that, but this is basically what it is. You're pretty much good from here on out. Like I said, message me or comment on this video if you need any help with anything. If anything's kind of unclear, I'll probably edit this video and think, wow, this is stupid, everything's terrible. But, you know, I'm trying. So, like I said, you know, message me there. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. If you don't, that's cool too. Like, if that'll help people who are trying to look for these kind of videos find this video if it's liked and got a lot of views and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, like I said, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter if you want to. That's where all my videos get, you know, I post on there, hey, making a video. That's when videos get posted. They goes to Twitter, things like that. Also, if you direct message me on Twitter, then I will get it a lot quicker than if you message me on YouTube. So, pretty much, yeah. Hopefully this was a little bit helpful. If there's any other thing, I'll make another, I'll make like a follow-up video with any questions if there's a lot of people. So, if you have any questions, ask them in the comments and I'll respond or make another video. But hopefully this should at least get you off your feet when it comes to 3D printing. So, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this video isn't as terribly long as it is right now. I'll edit it down as much as I can. So, anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thank you all for everything. All the subscribers, not subscribers, viewers, people who are awesome. Thank me so much. That thank me in the comments, this, that, and the other. You guys are awesome, and I really hope that I've been able to help. So, anyway, until the next video, I'll see y'all later.